Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I'm featured in the documentary about anti-Semitism, Never Again is Now. I'm a Dutch Jew and a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I immigrated to the United States because of the rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
I'm Phyllis Zimbler-Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, thinedgethewedge.com. I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, a small town in the Midwest, outside Chicago, in a community of Jews whose parents and grandparents had come at the turn of the previous century to escape the Tsar. So I did not grow up in a Holocaust community, and yet in 1970, my husband, U.S. Army officer husband, and I were stationed in Munich, Germany, only 25 years after the end of World War II, and this changed our lives forever. Evelyn?
Femmetje de Wind is an author, journalist, entrepreneur, and marketing consultant in the Netherlands. She wrote 2 novels in Dutch, titled Rivka and The Promised Life, in which the struggle with Jewish identity and with the Holocaust history of the family are central themes. Femmetje is at the board of Crescas, the leading Jewish educational organization in the Netherlands about Jewish culture. Femmetje, it's great to have you on our show. Welcome.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Phyllis.
One of the things you speak out against in Dutch media is anti-Semitism. Can you tell us about your family history during the Holocaust and how that influences you in addressing anti-Semitism today?
Yes, of course. Well, I might not be the best example of a second generation child because I grew up in a 3rd, 4th generation time era, because when I was born, my father was already 53 and he went through the Holocaust. When the Holocaust broke out, he was 21. So it was a bit strange for me because, of course, my father, well, not of course, but my father always talked about the Holocaust, about his experiences. And when I was a child, there was not so much like there were no other people around me who had the same experience, because the other Jewish families already had time, to build their families again. So let's say my Jewish friends, they had already uncles, nieces, like cousins, and for me, that was something, we didn't have that. So we were a very small family, only our family, let's say my father, my mother, and my sister. And I just never knew the concept of family, only by my father telling me stories about his family. So the story of his family is that, well, like all Jews who survived the Holocaust, they have a lot of stories, but the main story is that my father and his mother, they were taken by razzia, they took them to the train station and they put them on transport to Westerbork, which is the doorgangslager. This is like a camp where where they were brought to different camps in Germany. And my father was young and wild and wanted to be free, of course. When you are 20, 21, you don't want to be a prisoner, you are fighting for your life, and he knew that it was wrong, he knew that if he would go on that train, that he would never come back. That's always what he told us. So you sometimes hear the stories, that people didn't really know. They thought they would go to work there. And of course, that's probably also true. But my father had this feeling that that was not the case. So when he was in the train, he thought of something to do to get out of the train, And there was a guy who came to collect the last letters, like the postman, so to say. And he sort of looked him in the eyes, that's what he always told me. And he said please, can you open the door for me? So this guy, but he was like, I don't know, but he did it. He opened the door for my father, but not like he opened it. He took it from the lock, you know, so that my father could open it while later on while the train was riding. But now my father had this problem because he was there on the train with his mother, who was older and was not that fit as in a young guy, you know, in his 20s who could maybe jump from a train and survive. But my grandmother, that's what my father always told me, told him, go, you know, like you should try to escape. And so my father was on the train also with a group of friends. So all young men in their 20s. And they all together decided to jump from the train. So then when my father opened the door, because the train was going and it was in like a corner, you know, where it had to slow down a little bit. And then my father said, okay, we will jump in the corner. And then they decided not to jump, the friends, because they found it scary or dangerous, or they told him, no, Jacob, my father's name is Jacob, don't jump, it's too dangerous, don't jump. But my father thought, well, I will die anyway, so let's take the jump. And he jumped from the train and he survived. Nobody did, not his friends, and nobody followed him. Then when he jumped from the train, he was like desperate, and his mother had given him her last like 10, what would say now euros, but it was like florins, like guilders. And she said, like, that was like a lot of money in that time. She said, like, you will need it maybe, you know. So he was walking and he saw a guy, and he teared off his star, you know, from his coat, not to be recognizable as a Jew. And he asked this guy, like, please, can you help me? I don't know where I am. I don't know where I have to go. You know, I need to go somewhere safe. So this guy said, okay, I know. Are you from the Jew train? He asked him, and my father said, no, but I need to go somewhere safe. And because, you know, in that time, you never knew who you could trust, you know? So he said, I know where you can go. Go there behind the wall, jump over the wall, and then you're safe. So my father gave him the 10 guilders, you know, like to thank him. And then he jumped over the wall, and he was in the middle of a Nazi camp, you know, like where it's called like a cavalry camp. So like all the horses, you know, like all the
cavalry, yeah.
Yes, the cavalry. And he was like sitting there on that, like on the wall, or he was standing on that wall, and they all saw him, you know, and so he had to jump down. And I think there was the camp commander, and he saw him. He asked him, like, where are you going? What are you doing here? And he was like, oh, I'm on my way to work, and I wanted to take a shortcut, so that's why I jumped over this wall. And of course, or probably the guy knew what was going on, but he put his arm around him and he said, okay, I will bring you to the exits of the camp. And nobody could do anything because he was like the commander in chief there. And, you know, he walked with him to the exit or the entrance and opened the door for him and let him go. And then my father was like, again, you know, like on the streets and didn't know where to go. But that was like basically the story he always told us when we were children. And of course, after that, the story of a lot of like trying to hide in different places and meeting the right people. But I think what he told us is to take fate in your own hands for as long, I mean, if that is possible, of course, not for everyone it was possible, but he tried, you know, to not get into their hands, you know, to stay out of their hands of the Nazis. And it always gave me the idea that you shouldn't be quiet, you know, you shouldn't sit still. There's always something you can do. And it's not a guarantee, of course, but yes, it is a way of living in a way to and also he always told us they will not repress us anymore, you know, they will not do that to us anymore. We will always have to speak up, we will always have to show what's going on or what has happened. So yeah, that influenced me a lot, of course.
It's an amazing story, an amazing story.
Yeah.
Yes, so don't give in to try not to give in to the pressure of being taken away.
Exactly. And that you have also a say, you can do something, you can try to do something.
Yes.
Although, yeah, sorry, Phyllis.
No, I wanted to say, because we do need to move on, because we have so many important things. But the point that I take away from this is that we shouldn't just sit there and let fate happen to us. We should take the risk of speaking up, doing something, which leads to what we're going to discuss about your work today, speaking up against anti-Semitism. So can we set the stage before we talk about what actions that you're doing and what we hope our listeners will maybe be encouraged to do? What's the state of anti-Semitism in the Netherlands right now? And is it prevalent? Is it widespread, or is it just the media? Could you give us some overview?
Yes, well, actually just the CD, that is the Dutch Center for Information and Documentation for Israel, but also records all the anti-Semitism in Holland. They recorded a total of 183 anti-Semitic incidents in 2021. And that was the highest number of incidents ever registered by CD in a calendar year. So we can say it's a bit worrying. And it is also a big increase. If you look at 2020, it is an increase of, I think, 35%. So that is really something to worry about. And there was also another, I read some research about this, that in Europe, we also see that a lot of Jews, they don't feel safe anymore. This was, I think in 2018 already, that 80% of the Jews in Holland say that they feel unsafe, whether it is because of anti-Semitism on internet, on social media, or in the streets, or just in general, they don't feel safe. And 80%, I think, is a lot.
So, and the rest of Europe also has high numbers.
Can you give some examples of how anti-Semitic, the famous case of Theo van Gogh being murdered right near Evelyn's home in Amsterdam? But let's get a better feeling of whether it's just is not the right word, just the media attacks, or whether it's physical attacks, or how does that?
Yeah, well, you have different kinds of, let's say an example, last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a Jewish team, like a soccer team, from Maccabi games. They played a game here in the south of Amsterdam, and they were attacked by a group of another football game team. But there were all people from Morocco, or I don't know their religion, of course, but it seems like by their names, they're probably Muslims. So this is something, it's difficult, to say like, well, this is a problem between the Jews and the Muslims, but it is a problem, and it's really difficult to mention it because we all want to be inclusive. We all want to be open to other cultures, and especially to people who come to this country because they cannot live in other countries where for them it's unsafe, So let's say people from Syria or so, you want to be open to them. But then again, something that is difficult to address here in Holland is that a lot of anti-Semitism comes from this group, from this Muslim community. And therefore, I think it's always important to also talk with them and to keep, the lines open with this community. So yeah, that is an example of what just happened. This was really something that had a lot of impact because they went to the police. They did they filed a complaint against this group, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but that's one thing. Then you have the more political anti-Semitism. So let's say we just had a case here where Sidi, but also some Holocaust survivors, sued a politician who made a comparison of a young Jewish boy who was in the ghetto of Lodz, like a picture of him, who was about to go on, well, who was about to get murdered, of course. And he said, like, well, like this boy, you know, our children who cannot celebrate Christmas because of the corona policy of the Dutch government, you know, like making the comparison to show or to express how terrible it was that the children couldn't go, I don't know, on a school camp or whatever. And this is something which I think is very interesting because some people sued him. They went to court and the judge decided that he had to stop this and he had to remove his tweets. It was, I think, a tweet on Twitter or something. It wasn't social media. And it is interesting because it goes against the freedom of speech in a way, you know, because he says, yeah, I'm free to say whatever I want. And then the other party says, well, but it's very painful and it's really something you trivialize the Holocaust in a way, you know. And that is also a problem because if the Holocaust gets trivialized like that, you know, we say it wasn't that bad. You know, if you compare this to what's happening now with Corona or COVID-19, I don't know how you call it, but if you compare that, you sort of say like, it's a bit the same, you know, so it's not that bad to kill 6 million people. So I was very happy with the fact that the judge decided that this is not correct, that we cannot do it. And in this case, that it's more important not to hurt other people with what you say than that you have the freedom of speech, you know? So, well, those are two examples who are in the very recent here in Holland, what happened.
And I think they're very, very good examples.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I about your first example with the Maccabi soccer team, and how difficult it is to speak out. I understand that with my documentary, which is discussing all the kinds of anti-Semitism I came across when I still lived in Holland, and also discusses anti-Semitism coming big time from the Muslim community in Holland and in Europe. It's not easy to show the film in Europe. In America, it's easy to show it, but in America, in Europe, there is a kind of a barrier towards it.
Yes, yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
So, Femmetje, recently you organized a debate in the Netherlands called "The New Jews." Can you explain to our international audience what the debate was about? It was in Dutch, but what it was about and why it is called the New Jews, and why you considered it important to organize it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's very complex, but so I will try my best to explain this. So for me, it started, I saw a YouTube movie by Hans Steeuwen. He is a very famous comedian here in Holland. He made a YouTube film in which he expressed his disgust about the fact that there are so many minorities who call themselves like the new Jews. It's like the comparison again, you know, like, let's say, people who felt that the government took away their freedom during the COVID-19. They went to the Hague to demonstrate, and they were wearing like the yellow stars, you know, like and it was like really disgusting. It's like they saying we are the new Jews, you know. So, but not only they do it. There are also like politicians who well, they mean well, but what they, for example, say is like that the Moroccan community here in Holland, they are like the Jews in the 1930s, which I also think it's just not, you can't make that comparison, you know? So, and what this comedian said is, well, that basically the new Jews are the Jews, which is an interesting, you know, thought, because first of all, we're still here. You know, if you would say the new Jews, it means basically like the Jews are sort of gone, or we don't really have to reckon with them, you know, it's like long time ago. But we're still here and we're still having a problem, you know, we're still not safe. So why would you call other people or other minorities the new Jews? That is an interesting thought. And I thought we have to talk about that. And we have to stop making comparison, because there is one one example in where a comparison with the Holocaust might not be a problem, and that is maybe in Israel, because there also it happens, funny enough, you know, that people say like, oh, the governments are the Nazis, you know, because we have to stay home with COVID-19. And I spoke with a professor who is like, her name is Liat Steer, and she is publishing a lot about this. And she said, because Israel is like a traumatic, it's like like everybody there is in a way traumatized. And by doing this, by making this comparison, it helps to get the trauma normalized again, you know, like all little steps. But to talk about it, or maybe to make jokes about it, or to even exaggerate it and say like, oh, the government are the neo-Nazis. This is something, these are little steps in this process. But let's put this aside, you know, this is an example of, I think it's unique in the world. Only in Israel, I think we can do this. In other countries, we just cannot do this. So I thought we have to talk about this. We have to talk about also the fact that Jews, funny enough, they are a minority, but they are not being seen as a minority. They are actually always being referred to as privileged, funny enough. And why is that? So I thought about it, and I think that one of the reasons why we think Jews are privileged is because this is the narrative that Hitler and his, you know, PR gurus in that time,
Right.
that is the narrative they told us. They told everybody, you know, that the Jews are successful. They are the puppet players, you know, they know what's going on. They are behind the scenes everywhere. And that is still basically an idea that lives in people's minds, but they changed it. So what they did is they thought like, after the war, there was a big feeling of guilt. And I think by having the idea that the Jews are actually quite privileged, or that they are, well, quite successful, it takes away the guilt a little bit, you know? It takes away the feeling that you live in a society in where it has been possible that 100,000 Dutch Jews were taken away without any, you know, objection, you know, by the people. So I think by saying like, well, the Jews are privileged, we don't really have to worry about them. They also say something about their own guilt. They also say like, it's not that bad, you know, okay, the Holocaust happened, but they're doing actually quite well, the Jews, you know? So this is my feeling. So this is something that is not written anywhere, but this is the feeling I have. And I thought we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this also because a lot of, because I think that as a minority, we as Jews, we have to stand up and we have to say we are a minority and we are vulnerable. And you need to know this. But then there is another problem, and that is that Jews are not always so, they don't agree about everything. So that is another subject. But so I thought it's good to come together, you know, and see if maybe we can make a start by, you know, yeah, standing up a bit more and telling people that we are not privileged. I mean, not more than any other person living in this country. And we are a minority and we are vulnerable, and you have to also count us in, you know?
Yeah, how privileged are you if your community was wiped out, you know, for 80%, and you just said at the beginning of this show, of this episode, that you had no family from your father's side, so they were killed, right? So whole families were wiped out, one person coming back, and that was even an exception. So how privileged are you 2 generations later or 3 generations later, and as a community?
Yes.
It's may be true that Jews do relatively well in education and careers in a free society, but it's not privileged, right?
No. And the thing is that because we are not easy to see, we are not black. We are not wearing, I don't know, a rainbow scarf. We are not, so people think that because we are white and you can't really see that we are Jewish, well, most of the time not, that we are safe, but we are not. And then I always, when people say like, why, what do you mean? And then I said, no, maybe you can come to see the school of my daughter, because it is like a bunker. I don't know if this is an English word, but
fortress.
It is like, yeah, a fortress, exactly. And it's like, like we have a marechaussee, which I don't know the word in English either, but it's like, yes, the military police standing there every day. When they go on school camp, they have to get like, the military police is coming with them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about being privileged.
So you and people in your debate that you organized, and also somebody organized an exhibition in the Jewish Museum, Gideon Querido. It strikes me here from being in America that I see European Jews start to speak up against being called a privileged minority, period, and start to claim recognition of the fact that Jews are still vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, Evelyn, and I think, I don't know how it's in the States, but there's this whole minority debate, what is going on. People try to really count everybody in. So when there is like, even in like, I don't know, a photo shoot for a fashion magazine, everyone gets his place. But Jews are never they never have a seat at that table. And I just wonder why. So I really think that is important, that we also get a seat on the table, at the table.
I really like that fashion example, because I've been a proponent for a long time of different people in fashion shoots and on TV shows, except that it is a real problem in American television that there are Jewish characters, but they're not identified as Jewish, unless it's the stereotype, with cats, etc. And that is a problem. How do we introduce into American television, for example, I can't speak for Dutch television, so that there are Jewish characters and people begin to learn about Jews, since it's not so visible?
That is true. Well, I think that is the problem, that it's not so visible, and that that people don't really understand maybe also the weight, that we still carry on our shoulders, especially here in Holland. I think, for example, I just had an instance that I saw on Instagram. There was a video made by a very famous Dutch singer, songwriter, I don't know, but she has a lot of followers, let's say millions of followers. And she made a little film of her daughter, who was 3 years old. Daughter was, I think she fell on her nose. The nose was a bit swollen and red. And the girl was like screaming like, I have a Jewish nose. I have a Jewish nose. Which was like, I was looking at that, and she even did subtitle it, because in Dutch you say Jodenneus, which sounds a bit like rode neus, which means red nose. So she, just to make sure, that it was really a Jewish nose, she subtitled it, and I was like in shock. But then I saw that she had like 26,000 comments, and I opened it because I thought, okay, well, now I'm going to see, the people tell her like, this is not normal, Anyway, nothing. Only hearts, likes. Oh, how cute. Oh, how sweet. Oh, how nice. Nobody said something about the fact that it's just not right to do this.
Yes.
And how would it have been if she would have said like, oh, I have a black nose, I have a black nose, you know, or I have a, I don't know, a gay nose. I mean, the world would have been too small, you know. So I was really like,
Yes. The question is,
yeah,
why do people think it's appropriate to do that? And
exactly.
and what my next question for you, but I feel this strongly in America. We Jews aren't speaking up. We let those comments go by us, not real. You know, my play is called Thin Edge of the Wedge, which a lot of people don't get, but it's the comment that it's the point that you don't say anything until it's too late. And so
Exactly.
how do we get people? And I understand this was also discussed at your conference about Jews speaking up against anti-racism movement, not being included. How do we get Jews, let alone non-Jews, to understand we have to speak up against this kind of thing?
Well, and I think the awareness, raising the awareness that it's important to speak up and that it will make a difference, because I did send her an email and I told her that how it was for me to see this. And she did reply. She told me she apologized and she removed the film.
Could you say that? Let's repeat that. I think it's so important. You emailed her. Say it again for our listeners.
Yes, I sent her a direct message on Instagram, and explaining to her why it hurt my feelings and why it's not good, you know, and that it's also not good for her child, you know, to anyways. And she said like, okay, I am sorry, I apologize, and I will remove the video. And then of course I pushed a bit too far, because I said, you know, I really appreciate your apologies, but it might be even better if you tell all your followers this, because the 26,000 reactions, that are actually the ones who worry me the most, you know. But then I didn't get anything back. But at least she took off
So she did remove it.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to emphasize, maybe to some of our listeners, they'll think that's so small. I promise you, that's the opposite of small. That's how negative ideas about Jews get into the subconscious in a way that then makes people act as if Jews are the other. So I applaud you, and please, to our listeners, she wrote a simple, how many minutes do you think it took to write that DM? But you did it, and that's so important.
Yeah, yes, it is. And exactly what you say, you know, when this, what you showed me, like you can,
of the wedge.
You think like, okay, you think like, well, whatever, you know, but it's important. Those small things are big things in the end.
Big, and often in the battle against anti-Semitism or any other racism, or even injustice, small acts can be of big importance. The man in the train with your father who unlocked the door. It was a simple act to do. It saved the whole life and family of your father.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
So a jump from a train, you know, on the scale of the Holocaust, it's nothing, but it made all the difference. So
exactly.
So it's small things that are important. Often you don't always oversee it. And if we all do small things, if many people do small things, it's a big thing. So
exactly.
We just have to do our part, in my view.
Yeah. Yes.
So it strikes me that the Jewish community in America considers itself less vulnerable than in Europe. It's a bigger community than Europe, and there are less families that went through the Holocaust. There are other minorities in America that suffered a lot as well. So there is the Jew is less the ultimate victim, so to speak, in America, it seems, compared to Europe, and Jews feel less vulnerable in general than in Europe. And also are much more openly and proudly Jewish than we dare to be in Europe. Do you see the Jewish community in America as vulnerable, especially since anti-Semitism is rising here as well?
Well, you know, I always think of the United States of a place I can like ultimately go if it really gets not good here. You know, this is or Israel or the United States we can flee to. This is, I think, for a lot of Jews, it's always in the back of their minds, you know, like where do we go when so to say the shit hits the fan, you know, where do we go? And what I noticed is that over the past, let's say 10 years, or maybe since 9/11, that the feeling that the United States are safe is not so evident anymore. I wouldn't go there to feel safer, you know? So that says something to me. And that is because what you told me, like all the things you hear in the news, what happened in that synagogue, what happened, like all the time, well, not small things, but like anti-Semitic acts. So yes, it's something that also worries me, because if it is already there, you know, how will it be in Europe? Yeah. If that answers your question, yeah.
So you do see the Jewish community in America as more vulnerable than you thought it was?
More vulnerable than it was, but then again, you also have a different migration, like politics. So I think the big migration that is going on basically, or that will happen the coming decades, is a big, like, it's dangerous for minorities, and for the Jewish minority, it is very dangerous. That's something I worry about. And I think in the States, it is a bit, yes. So the migration is, you are more close to other, you know, like to migrants. So I don't know, maybe it will go slower there. But yeah, that is something, I don't know how that will go. But I know that I could have never imagined that these things happened in the States, you know, what happened there over
the incidents recently.
The incidents, yes. Especially like the shooting and the yeah.
So just to add something, as the only American born of the three of us, after my husband and I came back from living in Europe in May of 1972, we didn't feel safe because we had learned how quickly things could change. And the moment our children were born, when the oldest one was like maybe 3 months old, I held her up like in front of a camera so she could have her own separate passport, and the same with the next child, so anyone could take them out. So yeah. I don't necessarily, I understand that people outside the United States may think that it's getting worse, but it's always been there. I grew up as the only Jewish child in my public school classes. So I think that we Americans have always, since the Holocaust, have always had a false picture of our security and need to take our security seriously. This is my rant, so to speak, and speak up and try and stop it from getting so wide. So, yeah. So as we close and you get your chance to say anything that you wanted to say that we missed, are there any specifics for Holland, for listeners in Holland to speak up, where you see opportunities that are not being utilized as best as they could?
Well, the thing is that I think basically the problem is that I don't think the Jews should speak up, you know? It's funny that we always try to, I mean, of course, I think we have to speak up, but I think it would have been even better if other people speak up for us. And that is, I'm always a bit surprised by the fact that we are always looking for excuses. We're trying to analyze, why is there anti-Semitism? How does it work? How can we do better? Like that we always look at ourselves, to fix the problem. But I think the real ones who have to speak up are the politicians, are people in the media, the non-Jews who signalize this, like a Hans Theo, like the comedian I told you about, who do signalize it and who, who say like, hey, this is not correct. We have to do something. This happened before and we didn't do anything. Now is the time to do something. Now is the time to speak up. So, and this might be utopia, but I mean, this is what I think is going to make a difference. People who are not Jewish, but do speak up for us.
I think that's a really important thought to end with, unless you wanted to add something else. But I might add that it's our responsibility as Jews to get the non-Jews to speak up. So that's something that we can, right?
Yes.
We can educate non-Jews to speak up for us. So it still comes back to us.
It still comes back to us. But then again, when, for example, we organized this debate evening, the room was filled with Jews, and that is something that I think like, okay, maybe it's a small step, and maybe next time we organize it, also people who are not Jewish will be there because they think it's interesting and important. But we tend to preach for our own, community. And that is something that I wish, would be different.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think two things we will have to tackle there also within the Jewish community, but certainly outside of it, is that, first of all, there is a difference between legitimate criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism. And the second thing we need, because that keeps a lot of people from discussing anti-Semitism, because you get into difficult debates about Israel. And the second thing is, you can be anti-racist and still demand acknowledgement of the vulnerability of Jews, especially in Europe.
Yeah, and I think if we talk about other people who stand up for us, I should be a bit more specific. I really think that other minorities should also speak up for us. And now we addressed the elephant in the room, Israel. So what happens is that, for example, like at the Women's March, here it was in Amsterdam, there was one quite like a girl who said like, I'm a feminist, I'd like to walk with you in this march, but is it maybe possible not to carry like flags, Palestinian flags, basically is what she said, with us, because we're for every woman, right? So also for Jewish women, and if they are, if they have a close feeling to Israel, for us it's a bit scary, people carrying that flag, Palestinian flag. So the organization of the Women March, they said like, no, we're not going to do that. It's very important for us that people can wear the Palestinian flag, because they stand up for this minority, for the Palestinians. And then I think like, so who's going to stand up for us, like, because minorities have a tendency to stand up for other minorities. It's not really happening for Jews. And that is, it puzzles me. It doesn't really puzzle me, because I just think this is, but so yes, that's what I think, that we as Jews, we were walking this march with Martin Luther King, but nowadays I don't have the feeling we get a lot back from other minorities.
I think that's very well said. And with that, and perhaps our listeners will think about how they can encourage the exchange, that it's not always a one-way exchange of Jews supporting other minorities, and how we can encourage other minorities to support us. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We so much appreciate it. We appreciate our listeners. I urge everyone who has not seen Evelyn's document, Never Again Is Now, to please see it on Amazon or on YouTube. Some of the issues we discussed, the documentary will show, reflect more information about what we've been discussing, particularly in the Netherlands. You can find information about my play at thinedgeofthewedge.com. It's available for free for schools and organizations. It educates about a Holocaust and works to combat anti-Semitism. And for everyone, everywhere, Holland, United States, and everywhere, whenever you can, without putting yourself in bodily harm, please speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.